So this is an opportunity for the slideshow to start. Hopefully that will work.
Would you ask Sherry to mute your microphone?
Sherry, you need.
Sunday was established to honor these 4 chaplains, also called the Immortal Chaplains, because during World War II, they gave their lives to save others. Chaplains George Fox is a Methodist, Alexander Good is a rabbi, Clark Poling, a Dutch Reformed Protestant, and John Washington, a Catholic priest, and they were all aboard the ill-fated ship, the Dorchester, sailing to Greenland when the Nazi submarine shot it with a torpedo in the middle of the night. As you can imagine, this caused widespread panic, and the chaplains who had established camaraderie with each other and with the crew
set themselves to do what they could to get the passengers life vests and onto lifeboats. At one point, they gave up their own life vests. They linked arms, they prayed, and they sang hymns in their own language, Hebrew, Latin, and English, as the boat went down. One survivor recalls, "It was the finest thing I have ever seen or hope to see this side of heaven." We lift up this story as one of the tales of interfaith community ministries because these courageous, selfless chaplains showed us an ideal of shared humanity, of a deep, abiding calm that comes from their own religious beliefs, and that we do not need to have the same faith to have the same compassion. And this incident happened on February 3rd, 1943. And so we honor community ministries on the first Sunday of February. Second slide, please. When I first became a Unitarian Universalist, one of my favorite things to do was to pore over the list of famous Unitarians and Universalists. I'm not alone in that. I was fascinated at the variety of people, their skills, their accomplishments, their notoriety, some of them notorious, but essentially amazing people who did amazing things. And it was all influenced by their relationship to Unitarian or universal theological thought. Now, many of you know that Ralph Waldo Emerson was a Unitarian minister, and this greatly influenced his philosophy and writing. But did you know that Charles Dickens, who was known to express a distaste for some aspects of organized religion, found Unitarianism to be a tradition of enlightenment? There's the infamous P.T. Barnum, a circus man, who is quoted as saying, "A sucker is born every minute." Architect, inventor, philosopher, and futurist Buckminster Fuller, who liked to be called Bucky because he didn't take himself too seriously, and beloved musician Pete Seeger were all Unitarian as well. And as an FYI, There is a Wikipedia page as well as a website called Dictionary of Unitarian and Universalist Biography that can be found online. What I will lift up for you this morning are the Unitarians and the Universalists of the 19th century who took their ministries to the streets, into the prisons, into the mental asylums, who insisted on the self-evident rights of all people as abolitionists and suffragists. Next slide, please. One such person is Universalist Olympia Brown, a soft-spoken young woman who would become a most formidable force in the American women's suffragist movement, one who dedicated herself assuring women will take their rightful place in ministry and every facet of American life. After the 19th Amendment passed, she was one of the few early pioneers who was still alive to cast a vote. And that is a huge accomplishment indeed. Olympia spent the last years of her life devoted working for world peace as a member of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And we have one of those groups in Santa Cruz. Next slide, please. Another Universalist is Clara Barton, a person who brought the Red Cross to the United States. She learned about it and the Geneva Convention while in Europe. And when she returned, Clara visited Washington and urged the government to sign the Geneva Convention, which at that point was ignored by the US, and then set out to establish the American Red Cross in 1881. Next slide. As for the Unitarian women whose community ministries brought about significant change in American culture, I want to sing the praises of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, a African-American born free, which was very substantial at this time. She was a writer, a lecturer, a political activist, and one who promoted abolition, civil rights, women's rights, and temperance. She was instrumental in the establishment of several national progressive organizations, including the Pennsylvania Women's Christian Temperance Union, and helped found the National Association for Colored Women, serving as their vice president for 16 years. Frances also collaborated with notable women of the time: Ida B. Wells, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Olympia Brown. And today she is best remembered for her poetry and fiction, which preached a moral uplift and counseled the people who found themselves oppressed to figure out how to free themselves from the demoralized conditions. Next slide, please. And Unitarian Dorothea Dix is hailed as one who revolutionized the treatment of patients suffering from mental and emotional disorders. The story goes that while she was visiting a women's prison in Boston to teach a Bible study class, she witnessed firsthand the deplorable conditions and treatment of people with mental illness. Before then, it was a painful, hidden secret, but she courageously brought it forward. Dorothea was key in the humanitarian reform of the 19th century. Next slide, please. Our Unitarian Universalist community ministry past is rich and far-reaching, and now we move into the present. And this means a lot to me to share with you the community ministry of a dear friend of mine from seminary, Deb Hansen, and her journey to El Paso in these times. This video tells some of her story. Why press play? Oh, there we go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deb Hansen. I'm spending my third winter volunteering at Annunciation House in El Paso, Texas. It is a place of hospitality and grace, offering sanctuary and practical support for people seeking refuge from violence, poverty, climate destabilization, and more. It's an oasis of calm in the storms of life. Places like this are also prayers of possibility. They offer a lived experience of mutual respect, relationship, and solidarity. We see daily that people from many places can live and work together in peace, where everyone's basic needs are met in a supportive community, extending well beyond these 3 houses, its network of congregations, and currently 2 hotels. We tap into a variety of skills working in a shelter. We answer phones, open doors, register new guests, do laundry and casework. We make sure the house is clean and 3 meals are put on the table. We enroll kids in school. We call sponsors and provide transportation for them to the bus station or airport. When we have the time and energy, we organize entertainment in the evening. Let me share a few stories. First one, he mostly kept to himself. Before he and his wife leave, he mentions needing a cornea transplant. One eye definitely looks sore. He rolls up his sleeve. Wide ropes of scars cover his arm from an acid attack. Cartel violence. Another family with young children understands extortion. They had a gun brandished in their faces. Second story. He is young, tall, and gentle. His smile lights up the room. He was here for 3 weeks and gave me permission to share his story. He is from Congo and a candidate for asylum. We communicated in French, which remains the country's official language, a remnant of its colonized past. I interpret for him and his attorney, who got 5 people from Africa out of detention. He'd been in jail for 3 months. He has no family here, but he does have friends. His father had been killed in the fighting. Emotion wells in his eyes. He believes his mother and younger sisters are alive, but he doesn't know where they are. He fled Congo to Brazil, where he worked in a hotel. In the quiet hours, he likes to pick up the guitar that's kept in the common room and sing softly to himself. The humanity and commitment of his attorney touches me. Where do you want to go? A New England state where he knows people. Our guest is excited about moving to a state-run shelter. Friends had raised $200 for his bus fare. I used to live in that city, the attorney remarks. I have friends who might help. He suggests waiting a week so he can make arrangements to get a plane ticket. Agreed. Oh, by the way, we got E out yesterday. He's free. E was the last of the group in detention. Our guest's face fills with delight. Hey, I'll call him. You can talk to him yourself. E picks up and a joyful conversation follows. A magical moment in this community of care. The last story. He stood in the doorway as I was on shift yesterday evening. I sat him down and pull up a chair to sit in front of him, knee to knee. He cries and murmurs how he is going to leave his family and go out on his own. He talks about his sadness and dreams of having his own apartment and money. If you are a parent, you've probably experienced something similar. I tell him I agree with him about his situation, and he is right about being upset. and very, very brave. I tell him his life is important and we care about him. After some time, Mom comes to fetch him and take him back to his room, where she and 4 siblings sleep. He is 10 years old, bright, beautiful, and very, very sensitive. He and one of his siblings wet the bed most nights. There are no easy answers. If governments, particularly ours, did less harm, more people could feel safe to remain in their communities with their culture and their language. With climate destabilization, Miami will go under the waves if sea levels continue to rise. Where will these people go? When I felt the tug to go to the border, it didn't make sense. I'd been working on water, climate, and energy issues in my home state of Michigan. I hadn't been involved in immigration before, and I am not a policy person. I think I wanted to see for myself what was really going on here. I know I wanted to treat people with the same respect and concern that I would want for myself in similar circumstances. It is demanding, rewarding, and sacred work. It helps me stretch beyond my bubble of privilege and makes me more fully human. For me, this is about culture change and a change of heart. There is a need for volunteers, particularly long-term volunteers. But you can volunteer with Annunciation House for as little as 2 weeks. I blog about the experience on a hidden Facebook page if you'd like to know more. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're good.
Much has been presented here that is inspiring and uplifting. Some is heartbreaking. But it is that kind of heartbreak that calls us to action and invites us to wholeness. These days, you can find community ministries, both lay and ordained, as chaplains in hospitals, hospice, the military, prisons, places that care for people with mental health challenges. There's even an American Association of Veterinary Chaplains. There are spiritual directors, earth justice ministries, legislative ministries, transformative and restorative justice ministries, community ministries that show up at crucial times, like the Resilient Resources, a coalition of several ministers in Chico, California, that came together to support people who lost so much in the camp and Paradise Fires of 2018. I need my slideshow. There's just a few more slides. You know what? It's okay if it. Okay, yeah, the next slide after Deb.
People seeking.
We got. Okay, the next one after that. A truly unique community ministry was conceived up by Reverend Craig Schwallenberg called Your Game Ministry, where play and spirituality cross paths. And he advocates for the power of games and gaming to foster healing, learning, understanding, and community building. Next slide. A beloved colleague and also one who is also on the Unitarian Universalist Society of Community Ministry Board is Reverend Jane Davis. Jane works for the New Mexico Peer Education Project to support returning citizens, which is a preferred term for people who are returning from their time of incarceration. This is how she explains her ministry. As a community minister, I have been hired as a program specialist, and it is my responsibility to manage the training of peers and the training they provide to those who are still incarcerated and soon to be released. My goal as a Unitarian Universalist is to incorporate non-prescriptive spiritual teachings with hopes of working with the techniques of spiritual direction. I also have hopes of incorporating and building and discovering the enhancement of an individual's own theology and spirituality. And that's the end of the slideshow. Thank you so much for putting that forward for me. As you can see, there are countless ministries far and wide that are influenced by the Unitarians and the Universalists and our theological, humanistic, and democratic views of human society. Our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all people as a spiritual practice, and it is full of gratitude. It is widely recognized that congregations of many denominations are shrinking in size. So there is a demographic of people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious. And how do we reach out to them? How do we support them on their soul's journey? This is why I'm a part of the UU Society of Community Ministries.